Come here. Boy, how about showing us how you play chess in the slums? Evelyn Grant's voice echoed through the golden walls of her Houston mansion. Her tone was sharp, full of arrogance, and her words cut through the laughter of her wealthy friends. They were seated in her living room, a place that looked more like a museum than a home. Crystal chandeliers, polished marble floors, and paintings worth more than most people's houses. The guests leaned closer, their wine glasses raised, eager to see what kind of entertainment Evelyn was about to give them. To her, humiliation was sport. Tonight, her target was not another millionaire or rival. It was her maid's 17-year-old son, Marcus Brown. Marcus stood near the corner of the room, his back straight, though his clothes were plain. His mother, Evelyn's maid, had brought him only because she had no one else to watch him that evening. He hadn't spoken a word all night, only watching quietly as the rich guests laughed, drank, and boasted about their latest investments. Now, every eye turned to him. Evelyn smirked, waving her diamond-covered hand toward the chess table in the center of the room. The board was already set, pieces standing tall under the warm light. "Come, Marcus," she said, dragging out his name as though it was a joke. "Let's see if you know how to move a pawn. Or do you only know checkers from the corner store?" The room erupted with laughter. Marcus's mother froze. Her hands trembled as she held the empty tray against her apron. She wanted to speak, to protect her son, but fear kept her silent. She knew Evelyn's temper. A single word of protest could cost her the job that kept food on their table. Marcus lowered his eyes for a moment, his face calm. Inside, his stomach tightened, but not from fear. He was used to people like Evelyn. People who looked at his skin, his shoes, and his mother's uniform and decided he was nothing. What they didn't see were the long evenings he spent at the public library, flipping through old chess books until the librarian had to push him out at closing time. They didn't know about the hours he spent studying the games of grandmasters on second-hand computers, memorizing patterns until the moves felt like part of his blood. He stepped forward. The sound of his shoes against the marble floor echoed louder than the laughter. Evelyn tilted her head back, satisfied. To her, this was victory before the game even began. "Sit," she commanded. Marcus sat across from her at the polished oak table. His posture was straight, his hands steady. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The guests whispered among themselves. Some leaned in closer, smiling cruelly. They thought they were about to watch a comedy, poor boy fumbling with chess pieces while Evelyn displayed her superior mind. Evelyn made the first move, sliding her pawn forward with the confidence of someone who thought the game was already hers. She looked up at Marcus, waiting for hesitation, waiting for him to touch the wrong piece or glance at his mother for help. But Marcus didn't hesitate. He reached out, moved his pawn smoothly, and then folded his hands together. Evelyn frowned slightly. "Beginner's luck," she muttered. She moved again, this time faster, as if speed would prove her strength. Marcus answered calmly, his moves deliberate, his eyes fixed on the board. The room grew quieter. The laughter softened. A few guests exchanged looks. This was not what they expected. Evelyn forced another laugh, louder this time, trying to pull the attention back to her control. "Don't get too comfortable, Marcus. Chess is not for children. It is a game for thinkers." Marcus finally looked up, his dark eyes steady. "Yes, ma'am," he said softly. His voice carried no anger, no fear, only calm. His mother's chest tightened. She recognized that tone. It was the same voice Marcus used when he was certain of himself. The game continued, piece after piece, moving across the board. Evelyn began to lean forward, her smile slipping. She was trying to remember strategies she hadn't practiced in years. The more she tried to trap him, the more Marcus escaped, countering with quiet precision. The guests noticed. Their smirks faded, replaced by curiosity. A man in a gray suit whispered to his wife, "He knows what he's doing." Evelyn heard him. Her face hardened. She could not lose a note here, not in front of her circle. To her, Marcus wasn't just a boy. He was a test of her pride. Marcus, however, felt no rush. He had been here before, if not in mansions, then in his mind. Every night at the library, every page of strategy had led him to this moment. He slid his bishop across the board, capturing one of her knights. Gasps rose from the table. Evelyn's lips pressed tight. "Interesting," she said coldly. The room was silent now. The clinking of glasses had stopped. No one was laughing anymore. All eyes were on the board, where Evelyn's confidence was beginning to crack. Marcus's mother stood frozen near the wall, her heart torn between fear and pride. She wanted to smile, to scream that this was her son, her brilliant boy, but she kept still, her fingers digging into the tray she held. Evelyn shifted in her chair. For the first time, she felt the weight of her own arrogance pressing down on her. She had wanted to humiliate Marcus. Instead, she was the one being tested by a boy she thought beneath her. Marcus looked at the board, then back at Evelyn. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "Your move, ma'am." And in that moment, the balance in the room shifted. The guests leaned in closer, sensing something they had never expected. What began as a cruel joke was turning into a battle of pride, and Evelyn was no longer certain she would win. The game was far from over. But already, Evelyn Grant was beginning to realize the truth. This was no ordinary boy. This was the beginning of her undoing. The room felt heavy with silence. Only the soft sound of chess pieces sliding across the polished board broke it. Every eye was fixed on Marcus and Evelyn. Evelyn's jeweled fingers tapped against the table. She stared at the board, then at Marcus, her lips pressed tight. She had expected a comedy, a show of weakness. Instead, the boy sat across from her like a statue, steady and calm, his moves sharp and deliberate. She pushed her rook forward. The piece clicked against the wood. "Let's see how long you can last," she muttered. Marcus studied the board quietly. He did not rush. His dark eyes scanned the pieces as if every move was a story unfolding in his mind. Then, with a smooth motion, he placed his knight in a position that blocked her rook completely. A murmur swept through the guests. "That's clever," one whispered. "Impossible," another said under her breath. Evelyn heard them. Her cheeks grew warm. She straightened in her chair, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. "Beginner's luck," she said again, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. Marcus stayed silent. He knew better than to argue with arrogance. His silence spoke louder than any word he could have said. His mother stood at the edge of the room, her eyes locked on the board. She wanted to clap, to cheer, to tell everyone that her son had always been this way, quiet but sharp, humble yet brilliant. But she knew her place. In Evelyn's mansion, her pride had to remain hidden. Evelyn made another move, this time pushing forward aggressively, as though trying to force Marcus into a corner. She leaned closer to the board, her diamond earrings swaying with the movement. Her eyes darted from piece to piece, searching for control. Marcus tilted his head slightly, then moved his bishop across the board, capturing another of her pieces. Gasps echoed through the room. One of the men in a gray suit leaned forward. "This boy, he knows what he's doing. This isn't luck." Evelyn's jaw tightened. She felt the eyes of her guests pressing on her like a weight. This was supposed to be her moment, her stage. She had planned to make the boy stumble, to turn his failure into her amusement. But no, the laughter was gone. The air shifted. Marcus continued, his moves unfolding like a quiet storm. His fingers touched each piece gently, sliding them into positions that trapped Evelyn more and more. Every time she thought she had found a way out, he cut her off with a counter so precise it felt impossible. The guests sat up straighter. Some no longer watched Evelyn, they watched Marcus. The boy's calm expression, his steady rhythm, the way his hand hovered for just a second before delivering a strike, it all pulled them in. Evelyn tried to laugh again, but the sound came out hollow. "You've been practicing, haven't you?" she asked, her voice sharp. Marcus looked up, his face calm. "Yes, ma'am, at the library." The words cut through the room like a knife. A library, not a private tutor, not a chess club with paid coaches. A library. The guests exchanged glances. Some nodded in quiet respect. They understood the meaning. This boy had no advantage, no privilege, no wealth behind him. His skill was his own. Evelyn's smile faltered. She leaned closer, her hands tightening on the edge of the table. For the first time, a small tremor of doubt crept into her. Could she actually lose? She pushed her queen forward in desperation. Marcus's eyes flickered over the board. His lips pressed together as he studied the pieces. Then, with one clean motion, he slid his knight into place, pinning her queen and cutting off her entire attack. The guests gasped louder this time. "Brilliant," one whispered. "Did you see that?" another asked. Evelyn's face flushed red. She pulled her queen back quickly, trying to cover her mistake, but it was too late. Marcus's trap was already set. The boy leaned back slightly, folding his hands together. He looked at Evelyn with quiet respect, not mockery, not arrogance. "Your move, ma'am," he said again, his voice steady. Those 3 words hit Evelyn harder than any insult could. The guests no longer whispered, they watched in awe. Their eyes shone not with laughter, but with admiration. The boy was changing the room, piece by piece, move by move. Evelyn forced another laugh, her voice breaking. "This is amusing, isn't it? Let's see how long it lasts." But deep inside, she knew it was slipping from her control. Her hands shook slightly as she reached for a pawn. She tried to steady herself, but Marcus moved again before she could recover. His rook glided across the board, cutting into her defense like a knife through cloth. Evelyn froze. She saw it. The pattern, the trap, the slow tightening around her. He was building something dangerous. The room was silent now. Not a single guest dared speak. They leaned forward in their chairs, their eyes wide, their breaths held. The boy they had mocked minutes ago was now commanding their full attention. Evelyn swallowed hard. Her fingers brushed against her queen, then pulled away. For the first time, she didn't know what to do. Marcus's mother stood with tears in her eyes. Her son, the boy she had raised with nothing but hard work and prayer, was sitting in front of Houston's wealthiest people, proving them all wrong. She wanted to weep with pride, but she stood still, afraid of breaking the fragile silence. Evelyn glanced up at Marcus, her voice low. "Where did you learn this?" Marcus answered softly, his voice almost humble. "From books, and from watching Grandmaster games online." The guests stirred again, shaking their heads in disbelief. Self-taught. Every move he made was his own, born from nights spent in dusty library aisles, not polished classrooms or tutors. Evelyn's throat tightened. She looked back at the board, but the pieces no longer seemed clear to her. The patterns blurred. The boy's calm face across from her only made her more unsettled. She made another move, her hands trembling slightly. Marcus answered in seconds, placing his bishop into position. The guests gasped again. They could see it. The shape of something, forming something Evelyn herself couldn't yet name. Marcus's eyes never left the board. His lips parted just enough for him to whisper, "Almost." The word slipped past him without thought, but it carried across the room like a secret warning. The guests stiffened. Evelyn froze. She realized with dread what he meant. The game was no longer hers to control. The boy was circling her, tightening around her with every move. And though the game was not finished yet, everyone in the room felt that the storm was coming. Evelyn Grant, the woman who mocked him, was standing at the edge of her own humiliation. The air in Evelyn Grant's mansion was tight, almost unbearable. No one sipped their wine anymore. No one dared to whisper. Every pair of eyes was locked on the chessboard where Marcus Brown, the maid's 17-year-old son, sat across from the woman who once mocked him. Evelyn's breathing had grown shallow. Her jeweled hand hovered above the pieces, uncertain, trembling in a way she hoped no one would notice. But everyone noticed. Marcus sat calm, his shoulders straight, his hands folded loosely in his lap. He did not rush her. He did not gloat. He simply waited, as though time itself was on his side. Evelyn finally pushed a pawn forward, her move sloppy, desperate. The piece clicked against the wood, but the sound was weak, unconvincing. Marcus looked at the board for only a moment. Then, with a smooth, precise motion, he slid his rook across the square, capturing another of her defenses. The crowd gasped, their voices breaking the silence like thunder. Evelyn's chest tightened. Her mouth went dry. She leaned closer to the board, searching for something, anything that would save her. But the pieces betrayed her. Every quarter she looked at was blocked. Every path was cut off. Marcus was closing in. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She pushed another piece forward. A poor move, one she never would have made if she weren't drowning in panic. Marcus moved again, this time with his queen. The piece landed firmly in place. The guests saw it instantly. Gasps and murmurs swept across the room. They were no longer watching a game. They were witnessing a masterpiece, a trap laid so perfectly that Evelyn had no way out. One guest leaned forward, whispering to his wife, "He's going to end it. He's setting up checkmate." Evelyn heard him. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. She forced a laugh, high and broken. Amusing, isn't it? The boy thinks he can win. But no one laughed with her. Not anymore. Marcus studied the board. His eyes softened, as though the game itself was no longer about him and Evelyn, but about something larger, something that had lived in him for years. Every night at the library, every page of strategy, every match he imagined against unseen opponents, it had all led here. He lifted his hand. The room leaned forward. With calm certainty, he moved his queen one final time. "Checkmate," Marcus said softly. The words landed heavier than thunder. Evelyn froze. She stared at the board, her eyes scanning for escape, but there was none. Her king stood cornered, trapped, defeated. She was beaten not by another millionaire, not by a seasoned rival, but by the boy she had mocked in front of her friends. The guests erupted. Some clapped. Some gasped. A few shook their heads in disbelief, but every single one of them turned their eyes not to Evelyn, but to Marcus. The maid's son, the boy who was supposed to be a joke, the child genius who had just silenced them all. Evelyn's face burned. She wanted to stand, to shout, to twist the story into something else. But no words would come. Her tongue felt heavy, her pride shattered. For the first time in years, she had no power in her own mansion. Marcus rose slowly from his chair. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply stood, bowing his head respectfully toward Evelyn, as if to say, "I came here with dignity, and I leave the same way." His mother's hands trembled, as tears slipped down her cheeks. She had tried so hard to shield him from humiliation, yet here he was, turning it into triumph. Her son, her Marcus, stood tall before Houston's wealthy elite, not as a servant's boy, but as something greater. A woman in the crowd stepped forward. She was tall, dressed in a navy suit, her presence commanding but warm. It was Congresswoman Linda Parker. She had been silent all night, observing. "Now," her voice cut through the air with steady strength. "Young man," she said, addressing Marcus directly, "do you have a mentor? A program?" Marcus shook his head quietly. "No, ma'am. I just study on my own. At the library." Linda's eyes softened. She turned to the crowd. "This is genius. This is discipline. This is talent that deserves more than mockery. I will make sure this young man gets the opportunities he needs. Scholarships, sponsorships, a future worthy of his gift." The guests murmured again, this time with approval. Heads nodded. Some clapped once more, not for the game, but for the promise of what Marcus represented. Evelyn's chest ached. The room that once bent to her will now bent away from her. Her friends avoided her eyes. Their admiration had shifted completely, no longer hers to claim. Marcus lowered his head respectfully. "Thank you, ma'am," he said softly. Linda smiled. "No, thank you. Tonight you showed us all that greatness does not come from wealth. It comes from within." The words struck Evelyn like a dagger. Her empire, built on arrogance and cruelty, felt suddenly small, weak, fragile. The guests began to gather around Marcus, asking him questions, praising his brilliance. His mother stepped closer, her hands trembling, finally daring to rest them on his shoulders. Pride filled her eyes. Evelyn sank back into her chair. The sound of their admiration was unbearable. For the first time, she was invisible in her own home. And in that moment, Evelyn Grant realized the truth. She had tried to use her power to humiliate, but all she had done was expose her own emptiness. Marcus, on the other hand, had gained something far greater than victory on a chessboard. He had gained a doorway to a new life. Weeks later, his name spread. Jefferson University opened its doors to him with a full scholarship. Newspapers called him the chess prodigy of Houston. With Linda Parker's support, Marcus began an online program to teach other kids like him from poor neighborhoods who carried hidden talent but lacked opportunity. The world that once mocked him now celebrated him. And Evelyn? She found herself more and more alone. Invitations grew fewer. Whispers followed her at every gathering. The same people who once laughed at her jokes now laughed at her downfall. Her empire of arrogance had crumbled, not with fire or fury, but with the quiet strength of a boy she thought was beneath her. Marcus Brown had turned her laughter into silence. And in doing so, he had proven that dignity and intelligence will always outlast prejudice. Dear viewers, what happened in Evelyn Grant's mansion that night was more than just a chess game. It was proof that talent, dignity, and character will always shine brighter than arrogance and prejudice. Marcus Brown walked into that room as a boy people looked down on. He walked out as a young man everyone admired. His victory was not just over Evelyn, it was over every barrier that tried to keep him small. If this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Please like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories like this. And before you go, drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your voice. Remember, true greatness doesn't come from wealth. It comes from resilience, from discipline, and from the courage to rise above hate. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.